Hi, this is Andy Lark. It's great to have you with us today. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Dubber, and we're really pleased to be able to spend a bit of time with you this morning. I promise, I know you're probably suffering from some degree of Zoom fatigue, so we won't let this go too much longer than about 30 or 40 minutes out of respect for your time. With me, I'm thrilled to have Amardeep Taur from Mobius joining us. Amardeep is based down here in Australia with us. He's in Sydney today. I'm in Melbourne. He looks after product management, and when we get to the Q&A bit, I'm sure Amardeep will have a whole range of different insights and thoughts to share with us all in relation to how we go about ending compliance uncertainty. I thought a really good place to start today would be talking a little bit about what we see happening in our conversations with compliance and risk officers, not just in the financial services sector, but also more broadly across regulated industries ranging from gaming through to travel through to entertainment and indeed government. And really they fall into these buckets that you can see here. We're seeing obvious enormous complexity. Most financial organizations today are subject to regulations that don't just exist here in Australia, but also exist in the UK, the US and beyond. Most are multi-geo. And they're subject to regulatory demands, not just from regulators, but also industry bodies, government organizations, reserve banks, and a lot more. And this complexity is really being multiplied due to COVID. We've got this notion of work from anywhere sort of dominating, which has given birth to many more endpoints. I recall walking into a large bank here in Sydney, and you were required to check your cell phone in at the front desk because they didn't allow anyone to use it. They didn't use unified communications platforms. Well, those days are over. Really, employees today expect to be able to converse with customers and indeed from anywhere. At the same time, the regulators have expectations around two things in particular. One is know the customer and provisioning good advice to the customer. But those investigation demands are also increasing, where their expectation of a response is within a day or two, it's not within months. And this ability to quickly pass large data sets and get them an answer has become more and more crucial. Right alongside these three factors, we've also seen sort of this explosion of data that is largely siloed. So a lot of organizations try to capture crucial conversations, but they do it in the context of an individual app. With the growth of applications like Zoom, like Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx and the like, many have started recording within the app, hitting that record button, which unfortunately breaches a large number of compliance regulations because those recordings are not either authorized by the other party. They don't address PCI compliance where crucial data might be exchanged and more. So there is this real demand now for solutions that capture all crucial conversations, whether they're text, messaging, email, unified communications, video conferencing like we're doing today, UC, phone calls, and more. So all of these factors together have really created quite a significant compliance chasm. And I think the renewed interest in how do we capture voice conversations, text-based conversations and more has only accelerated due to COVID and due to the demands to deploy unified communication solutions, where organizations have been forced to acknowledge that where they once could exercise a reasonable degree of control over how the employee engaged with them and with a customer, that has been really challenged. So when we look out at how this works, what you see today is still about 80% or more of crucial conversations are voice and largely augmented with digital. So they're augmented with text messaging, they're augmented with a whole range of other communications. So there's this sort of myth that today, well, lots of our communications are just email. It's not the case. And in fact, many regulators want and demand financial organizations to have a voice-based conversation, a rich and meaningful conversation as part of the process of knowing the customer. Unfortunately, less than 10% of these crucial conversations are captured. We time from large financial institutions who, when they go looking for a conversation, find that conversation or that record of text messages, of chat messages and the like missing. They're locked up in individual applications, or they could have even occurred on someone's personal device. So only a small portion of the are in fact captured today. And that's amplified by the fact that 50% or more of customer conversations in financial institution happen outside of the call center. So they don't actually happen in a way where the conversation is controlled off core banking network infrastructure, be that the bank network itself, the IP network, or the SIP trunk line coming in. And so particularly in environments like investment banking, merchant banking, home lending, mortgage advisory, financial advice, a huge number of those conversations, if you like, are off the core network. So the question becomes then, how do you start to capture these conversations and start complying? Because if the majority of these organizations plan to make remote work, you saw Salesforce, I think, this week announcing that they would have 3 modes of working and employees could pick whatever one worked best for them. How are you going to deal with this new world? When you look at the spectrum then of financial services regulations globally, it's pretty unusual to find any organization of any size not subject to nearly all of these regulations on the left of your slides there. But particularly in Australia, we're obviously subject to ASIC, APRA, Reserve Banks, AUSTRAC and the like, but PCI is equally important as a mandate. And what people often miss is that within these discrete applications they're using, if they're trying to capture messages within the application itself, they miss the direct capture and retention requirements. Now, many of our regulations here in Australia span a 3 to 5 year window. Many don't quite realize that PCI, if you're operating globally in cross-border commerce, is closer to 7 years. You actually have to have full data discoverability and protection, so you need to consider notions such as legal hold, isolated compliance data sets, and also determined retention on specific individuals or specific functions within the business. Little nuances exist within these regulations. So when we talk to, they often go to proof of good and quality communication. So they actually aren't necessarily always looking for a breach or a direct evidence of a failure in compliance. They're often looking more subtly for proof of was the conversation of a good or sufficient quality. Were the customer's best interests being fulfilled, and was the organization meeting their obligations there? Which is why it's so critical when you think about the notion of capturing crucial conversations. You look at layer down into basic things such as are transcriptions readable? Are they easily reviewable? Can they be searched for keywords? Do you run sentiment analytics across your voice and communications data set? Because functions such as that lead you to very, very good proactive monitoring. You can identify employees perhaps who are increasingly using word patterns and language, making recommendations on things they shouldn't be recommending very, very quickly. But at the same time, that same data set is particularly useful for security and fraud detection. You're able to determine, based on voice patterns, if it is a person or isn't a person that you should be dealing with, whether they are blocked in providing sufficient information over a number of calls, for instance, there's a whole range of data that you can start to surface very, very quickly that leads you to be able to report suspicious activity to a regulator, but also identify suspicious activity across that 80% or more of conversations going on in your business that you're not able to easily see today. So what I'm trying to paint a picture of here is that there's a real tendency often to look at what we would call the very black and white compliance terms, such as, do you have data? Is it stored? Is it non-refutable? While at the same time missing the more subtle nuances of a lot of these regulations that have to do with providing good and quality information to clients and managing and maintaining their best interests. And just as I'm going through this, if you do have questions, you do have a question panel there within your webinar, within the GoToMeeting. We've got some folks that have shot us a few questions in advance, so really we'll touch on those as a starter. But if you do have questions as we're going through this that come to mind, just drop them in to the GoToMeeting console there, and we will pick them up and answer them at the end for you. So when you look globally, some of these regulations, some of these aren't necessarily here in Australia, but I thought it worthwhile, rather than preaching probably to the converted, you're probably fully aware of the compliance regulations that exist here in Australia, talking about some of the global ones for you. So when you look at something like FINRA and what they're demanding, they want all business communications. The language is broad and expansive, right? They want ledgers, tickets, confirmations, records, text messages, everything. They want everything captured. And the challenge for any financial organizations that we talk to today, and even addressing FINRA requirements, is that data set is spread far and wide. It is very, very hard for them to get to the data set, access it, and make use of it. So this notion of what we call voice intelligence cloud, and I'm using voice liberally, it's the voice of the customer, whether they've typed it into a text message, whether they've spoken it on a mobile phone, whether that notion of cloud recorded in a call center of a voice intelligence becomes absolutely vital. And if you think about it, for most today, if you accept the basic premise that the majority of our business conversations today are in fact voice, it's probably the largest untapped source of data in an enterprise because it hasn't been fully addressed. We also saw at the start of COVID, people like the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK giving organizations a bit of a hall pass on having to record crucial conversations. Well, those days are over. They came out, I think it was about a month ago, and said, we're calling time on that. We now expect all crucial conversations to be captured and recorded. So I think you're going to see these organizations all talk to each other. And the global what we're seeing now is more and more regulators getting aligned or approaching this new world that we live in. So when you think about this notion of capturing compliant conversations, the first real step in ensuring that you is the notion of actually compliant in the capture of the information. And many organizations we talk to struggle with this first point. How do you deploy auto notifications and text that the message has been captured and stored? How do you do that on a phone call? How do you ensure that that is automatically on and happening? And the simple answer there is it should always occur at a network level. It should occur in the heart of a Dubber or in the heart of a Mobius. It should occur in the heart of a service provider network. It shouldn't be a variable that an employee could turn on or off. They shouldn't be able to go in and delete messages. But more importantly, if crucial information is provided, a good example being credit card data, that information is automatically redacted as it occurs, so that it is not visible to other parties, and it can't be shared around an organization. The second thing is this idea of knowing, and most organizations today have struggled to apply AI and to use AI to generate alerts, reports, and manage data to regulatory standards. So a lot of this, I mean, there's not a vendor out there today, I don't think you'll find, that likes to sprinkle a little AI pixie dust on everything they make. This is a little more than that. This is the notion of using AI to automate storage, using AI to automatically alert where keywords that are occurring that shouldn't be occurring are flagged, where data can be instantly firewalled and stored in primary and secondary compliance data sets. And the third point is then, how do you quickly report and respond? And this is an interesting one. I was with a large financial services organization a week or so ago who have quite siloed call and message recording going on. But for them to interrogate their data requires that they run a SQL query across literally terabytes of data. The yield on that query is normally 20 minutes or longer, and they could have to do that 30 or 40 times a day. So I want you to imagine in a new world where this thing we call the voice intelligence cloud exists, that search is as fast as any Google search that you do today, where that data is surfaced instantly in readable transcripts and message fragments, where you can respond near instantaneously with the actual voice record as well as the transcribed record of a conversation, where you don't necessarily have to rip and replace everything you've got. You can actually start to route and path call recordings from existing call center platforms and the like directly into and onto your call compliance system. So there are many other layers to this sort of these three, but these are the dominant three that expose people today. This notion of they don't know if they're actually capturing all the conversations. Often when they go looking for those conversations, they're not there, and it's quite hard to do it as all these proliferating endpoints occur. Where they don't have AI to automate compliance at scale, and then finally where they don't have very simple and easy to use tools to access that huge amount of data that can exist very, very quickly. So what unified conversational recording and voice AI enable you to do in summary is capture conversations from any endpoint or app, automate your surveillance and undertake real-time search, intercept suspicious conversations for AML and CML reporting, really accelerate your investigations. But I think more critically, the smart financial institutions we see out there are very, very adept at using all of this data to coach and train staff. So they're able to move from just reactive compliance to this notion of continuous compliance, where they're perpetually maturing their own organization's ability to understand what's right, what's wrong, and give them real life examples. So the benefits of getting this right are immense and span well beyond what you would regard to be just this gives compliance investigation. And this gives you just a sense of that simple premises. And I think the crucial thing we emphasize to people that in order to eliminate the compliance chasm, you have to view compliance as enabled by technology. It's not just a human-powered business activity. If you unify your conversational data in one place, if you make it native to the networks that it's occurring on, and then it exists in the cloud, you can do a great deal with that data set that you simply cannot do today with ad hoc, application siloed, legacy, conversational capture and recording. So some of the things, these are just a few of the things you want to be looking for. Our firm belief is this should not be a hugely punitive cost that adds to the business. It should be enterprise grade in terms of the way it's managed. And across both Mobius and ourselves, we have to manage domicile data sets across well over 100 countries globally, where if conversations with one branch or unit of a bank have been captured in the UK or say in Germany, they're stored there, they live there, they're not exported around the world. So there are many dimensions to this we won't go into today, but we're happy to follow up with you on and get into in more detail. So here's a few quick examples for you of different banks and institutions around the world that have had to address this. So this is an example of a very large private bank, and I'll just give you a simple practical thing that we encountered here was that the diversity of languages the bank had to capture. And so many people, when they look at unified call recording, they sort of get obsessed with this notion of transcriptions, right? And they get heavily guided by transcriptions. And we have a firm belief that, well, transcription is actually a commodity now. There's any number of vendors from IBM through to Google, through to Amazon and others who can transcribe a conversation. What you should be doing is picking, and we obviously enable flexibility, but picking the one that fits the core language patterns your business has to capture. In this case, they had a particularly unique requirement to capture a lot of Hebrew, which only one of those vendors could really satisfy on a quality basis. But the real business problem they had was they just didn't have the time to listen to every recorded call to identify breaches. They needed to be able to search those calls in volume. And they needed basically the entire environment automated. And so what a unified conversational platform gives them is that total confidence that they are seeing compliance breaches in real time, that they have 100% visibility of all conversations, and that it's hyper efficient and automated. Because when you're deploying this across thousands of employees, you simply can't scale your compliance function to match the volume of data. We also saw through this bank and another interesting dynamic emerge in the sort of work from anywhere era. And that was this idea of they wanted to also monitor employee sentiment, not just customer sentiment, but employee sentiment. They wanted to get a sense where employees weren't trending towards positive conversations, where they were trapped in cycles of negative conversations. They wanted to identify customers who were perpetually phoning with issues that could have been resolved elsewhere or with those signals of suspicious activity. So that ability to also monitor the employee and ensure that they're being well looked after in this sort of work from home anywhere era is equally important. This is another example for a major bank here in Australia with traders around the world located in the on turrets. And really looking to track every single conversation across any device and any network infrastructure. So they simply didn't have anything in place for this. And it wasn't until it was flagged that they weren't actually compliant because they didn't have accurate conversational recording, both text through to voice, that they understood that urgent change was needed. And the interesting thing here is, much like in the next example I'm going to give you, this is not an arduous exercise to address. This is not something that is going to require substantial professional services or anyone rolling servers and storage into your environments. It's something that turns on with a click. And these large institutions are continually surprised at how easy this is. Some of them are driven to switch. The only major thing we sometimes see is they're driven to switch their net that at this turn of the click, and can largely be administered through a centralized console, so they have total control of what's happening across the environment. Another example of a large Asian bank, and it's not just, and I think that one of the crucial capabilities we've seen Mobius bring to the table globally is this ability to provide the platform that does enable safe, secure, responsible text-based communications and calling on a network. So this ability for a large Asian bank to deploy in under 15 days, have it activated within minutes, fully MiFID II compliant, in a very simple and easy way across Dubber and Mobius is incredibly powerful. So the reason we're showing these examples is a lot of times when I talk to banks and I do a similar presentation to this, they go, wow, this sounds amazing. It sounds like a huge amount of work to get this done, and how many months and months of effort and professional services is going to take. And I'm trying to paint a picture that answering these compliance mandates is actually very, very easy. You can turn it on within minutes. You can scale up a full deployment within days, and instantly be benefiting from a single repository for all your recorded and captured customer conversations. So I've tried to paint a broad picture here, and we've got a few questions. Do enter your questions, and if you've got any specific questions, we've got a few to run through that folks have sent us in advance, just ahead, I think to save themselves typing or because they might be on the road. But the risk of non-compliance, there are so many. You know what they are: reputational risk, financial risk, as we've seen in Australia, runs into the billions of dollars for breaches and infractions. The real risk here is not taking advantage of an opportunity which nearly has an instant ROI and benefits the business more broadly, when the costs are almost 2.7 times that of actually running effective compliance management. The key thing here is once you have this in place, we see this time and time again where a large bank will start capturing and recording the conversations. Within months, people from the business are showing up saying, well, can we get access to those recordings too? And the architecture enables that flexibility where you can replicate data sets and then easily make it available back to the business. So this notion of continuous conversational compliance can enrich the overall business performance rather than waiting 6 months or 12 months for NPS or customer experience scores. You get them in real time. If you want to understand the sentiment and tone and how your traders, how your call center people are feeling on any given day, you get that in real time. You want to use that data to enrich your Salesforce instance, for instance, or your CRM platform. That's a simple API plugin. You want to create automated workflows to route conversations that were suspicious or negative back to the call center for further investigation. We can do that automatically. So the benefits here go well beyond just compliance once this is implemented, and we see more and more people who look at this through the ROI lens and sort of say, well, you know, the ROI logic behind deploying these solutions within the compliance environment, given it's necessary, we have to do it, but there's good ROI here, just in not scaling our headcount in undertaking investigations and answering regulatory queries. But there's significant additional ROI we can get as we deploy this data set back out and across the business. So I've tried to take you on sort of a whirlwind journey through the world of unified conversational compliance, what the opportunity is, what some of the issues are. And with that, I think Amity, why don't we sort of take a quick look at a few of the questions. Maybe I'll just kick off by asking you, have you had any cases of customers you could speak to who have sort of fallen victim to sort of security flaws around conversational compliance over the past 12 months?
Andy, yeah, look, without mentioning any names, I think there were some big ones that happened that were in the news. And there were a lot of other ones that happened that probably won't never get out in the news, but the banks or the financial institutions or any other organization where it happened, they know that it's happening, right? So like you said, pre-COVID, things were easy. If you really wanted to monitor someone for compliance, for regulation purpose or other purpose, give them a desk phone, make sure every conversation is recorded. It was easy. So it was done. But soon the companies realized, okay, how do we now temporarily fix it where staff is working from home? Then temporary fix became into, okay, how do we now offer a more permanent solution where we have to offer this kind of flexibility? You can work from anywhere and still have the same level of compliance. So that's become quite a challenge for a lot of organizations. Some learned really fast and scaled up. Some went through a lot of pain points. So yeah, without mentioning any names, I think there have been a lot of cases in the 12 months where it's happened, Andy.
And so, what's the if you were to sort of summarize, what are the sort of the three primary compliance challenges you're hearing from clients at the moment?
Yeah. So absolutely, the first one was the enabling that work from anywhere type environment. So, and that is the norm now, right? So we have to accept it. Even some of the things you highlighted in your slides, even though people are going back to work, the notion of work from anywhere will continue from here onward. So that's the biggest challenge. The other challenge, which we found quite a lot of times, companies will say, okay, we got a solution that can record voice calls. So they try to scale that to now, I can either forward your fixed line desk phone to your mobile so you can work from home, which again led to a lot of sort of gaps in between because it doesn't record everything. But we're also finding, as you were saying at the start, that this whole fatigue around whether it's Zoom or Teams, whatever tool you're using, the messaging is becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, in Australia, messaging is already quite a big medium in terms of communication, but it's now going into more and more customers want to talk to you, whether you're a banker or a financial advisor or a trader. They want to send you a quick message to either inquire about something or providing directions to do something. So that part we've been missing quite a lot in terms of companies were finding challenges. How do we capture that? So that's been a big miss in a lot of communication. So, and third one, again, you touched upon it, this whole regulation, whether it's coming from the government or coming from industry bodies. My view is, and it's been sort of highlighted in the last 12 months, it's only going to get stricter, right? If you look at the financial services industry, the amount of money that gets poured into these retirement funds, whether it's superannuation or 401k, that's growing every day. So the scale of risk is actually growing as well. Any fraud or anything that happens in that space, the consequences are quite big. So the onus is back on the organizations that are managing these large funds to have that compliance all the way through. And one way that is through these tools that can capture everything, provide that additional layer of intelligence, so you're not going about searching for these things, so they're proactively being monitored, and any sort of indication of a fraud can be proactively alerted to the right people as well. So those are the kind of things I think that they're becoming more prevalent, and I see it sort of becoming more and more important in future. So.
No, those are great and very similar to what I'm hearing from financial services institutions around the world. I'll give you three sort of probably less obvious ones. I think the first thing is the compliance and teams within these financial institutions are an incredible bunch of people who typically are working very, very hard to do very, very tricky work. And I think when I get down and I talk to the people on the teams and show them the tools that are available from the likes of both our companies, they are just relieved because just the basic data of being able to go, all right, I want to see all conversations between Andy Lark and Amardeep between these two dates, and I want to see anyone that might have mentioned the word stocks because the client is claiming that Andy recommended Amardeep that he buy lots of double stock, and he's not allowed to do that. So the ability to get that data based on a simple search-based query like that in real time is a relief to them. The second thing I see, particularly when I talk to the business decision makers on the other side, is they're often not aware that they're not compliant. They actually think, and it's not until we get in front of them, that they're actually recording all the conversations in their call center. And we sort of sit there and go, well, actually, you're not. You're sampling recorded conversations. You don't have legal hold and retention on that data set. A large number of those calls are deleted because your storage is not in the cloud, it's actually on premise. So therefore, you have auto delete rules set up that actually aren't compliant. So it's not till you actually get in the middle of these businesses and show them what's going on, they suddenly realize they're actually not compliant. And The third thing I see that they recognise, but they've struggled to throw a handle around, particularly as they get a more diverse workforce in terms of age and behaviour coming in, is despite the very best training in the world, employees tend to default to the path of least resistance in achieving their goals. And this proliferation of platforms in their business that they're not always entirely aware of, despite their best efforts, means that they need to actually enable the workforce with the right tools. And the rise of platforms such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams and the like has meant that now they're struggling to roll out these systems and platforms at speed while answering this need to record and capture crucial conversations occurring on that network. So yeah, it's very, very similar things to you. Amity, perhaps there's some lessons here from other industries you could maybe touch on. Are you seeing similar pressure points in other industries such as gaming, wagering, entertainment, and the like?
Yeah, look, a lot of those industries are sort of now looking more seriously into all this. The one that sort of become quite clear in the last 12 months is the health sector as well. There is a lot more compliance requirement, but at the same time, you don't want to take away the experience where, let's say, a patient is sharing something in confidence that you don't need to record. But if you are recommending something which is a diagnosis or something, that part needs to be recorded. So that communication might not be verbal, right? It might be through something, an email message you send through or an SMS. So more and more those kind of requirements are sort of coming to the fore, right? Our focus from Mobius point of view, for attendees who don't know about Mobius, we provide a mobile unified communication solution, which is purely cloud-based. It works on a mobile device, offers a second line number, and that second line number can optionally be sort of monitored in terms of recording. So you can record any calls associated with that number, any SMS, but we're also introducing new channels such as WhatsApp messages as well. So Andy, our focus primarily being into those two industries at the moment, but we're starting to see some requirements coming up from other industries, which I'll say that they're still, for us, they're still very early stages, but we can see this requirement becoming much bigger just beyond these two sectors.
All
Andy,
right.
we lost you there.
I might have just lost you there, Amadip.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, my apologies, yeah. So one final question, we're sort of getting to our 40-minute promise here in terms of timing. Can you talk about maybe just one quickly customer project that delivered surprising data or surprising outcomes that you weren't expecting to see?
Surprising. I'm sure there are a lot of surprises as we go through these deployments. Well, one thing I must say, sometimes when we talk to the customer, they're coming up with sort of subset of their employees type requirements, saying, hey, we got these employees who are on this type of job function, we want to record it. But they soon realize that if they want to scale those solutions, they have to think about how do I deploy this in multiple countries. I think you touched on that in one of the examples. But also now simply going beyond that subset of employees to, okay, now how do I roll out the same solution that works across a much bigger employee group, enables me to manage it, so I can easily manage when employees move from one part of the business to another, and I can continue to enforce that employment without thinking about it in terms of at the individual level. So how do I manage it easily? Surprises, I'd say that nothing that sort of comes to mind, but we're starting to see that opportunity actually growing beyond just a subset of employees that need to be recorded. I think that's coming out clear.
Yeah.
And that's global solution requirements, which is also, it comes into forward in terms of the manageability, or whatever department internally is trying to manage that. complexity of compliance, but also the ability to roll out these things quickly, right? So sometimes if you start thinking about relying on an in-network recording, that can take months to roll out. Then you're locked into that solution where you can't deliver the same solution in another country because the carrier there might have a different solution or different network. So I think the cloud-based solution, which is independent of the network layer, and the ability to integrate that solution into wherever the employees are working from, has been quite useful in terms of the taking the approach. If you're working on your desktop, have the ability to capture conversation there on your mobile phone, or even if you are a salesperson who's making calls from within or contacting your customers from your CRM, say within Salesforce, your ability to make calls or send messages. So how to capture all those channels in a way that's sort of easy to make sense as well.
Yeah, I think you've put a bow around our conversation nicely in terms of the fact that for this to achieve compliant conversations and meet these regulatory demands, the conversations need to occur at a cloud and network level, not at a device or application level. They need to be extended across the entire enterprise, from HR through to traders, through to lenders, through to brokers and more, and that they need to be enforceable. Like you can't rely on someone doing the recording. The recording just has to be native and occurring all the time. So I think that's a good place to leave it. Thanks, Amardeep, for joining us today. I think this was a great conversation. I hope folks who are listening in got a lot from it. Feel free to reach out to us at Dubber. I'm Andy .Lark, L-A-R-K, at Dubber.net. And Amardeep, what's the best way for people to reach you should they want to?
Yeah, just Amardeep Tour at mobiuscorp.com.
Great. And Amardeep's AMARDEEP.tour. So if you folks would like to reach out to Amardeep on anything, you've got his details. And we look forward to seeing you on other webinars. You've got a copy of these slides coming your way, I believe. We've also got a great compliance guidebook we've put together that'll also give you a lot more information and background. And we have a ton of other compliance related resources. Should you need anything further, we're happy to send those over to you. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to complying with you all very soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.